Conversations across time. Oh.
Yeah.
All right. Conversations across time. 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 Conversations across time.
Good evening. Welcome to the second part of a conversation across time that is very timely, and we have enjoyed doing this, and I just hope you uh, enjoy it as much as we have had the pleasure of doing this. It's just been great. So um, it's about what is happening today, and that is, of course, the war in the Ukraine, uh, the conflict there. So our panel tonight, the return panel for tonight are some of our most interesting, intriguing personalities that have ever appeared on Conversations Across Time.
Hi, good evening. I'm Fyodor Dostoevsky. I am Russia's greatest author. I am also the favorite author of President Putin of Russia. My famous novels are The Brothers Karamazov, The Idiot, and Crime and Punishment. Many of my characters embody the philosophy in terms of disdain for the West, love for Mother Russia and its old culture. And these are the same values that President Putin has. And if we understand these values, we may better understand what he's trying to accomplish.
Good evening. I am Sir Winston Spencer Churchill, and from 1940 to 1945, I was the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, and I have led my nation and its people through the Second World War, and I encourage my people to stand fast against the German onslaught throughout Europe and to bring down the tyranny of Adolf Hitler. I have asked my people to expect much sacrifice, toil, and sweat and tears to bring down this tyranny. I feel inspired by the example made by the Ukrainian people.
So when last we met, at the end of what had been a very insightful conversation, I brought up the subject of Yalta, the conference of Yalta. And I know our audience already knows this, but just to be redundant, I want to say that the conference at Yalta took place in February 1945. And it was a meeting suggested by President Franklin Roosevelt to have an agreement with how Europe was going to be divided, because obviously they knew in February of 1945 that Germany was pretty much defeated, and that was a known fact. And so how they were going to carve up Germany, and not only how were they going to carve up Germany, but how they were going to carve up spheres of influence going forward. And so Miss President Roosevelt was obviously as the convener of this meeting, and then you, Sir Winston,
Yes.
and Joseph Stalin. And the three of you met ostensibly for the purposes that I just outlined. So now, given that backdrop, so Winston, is there anything going on today that seems to be at odds with the whole notion of the Yalta Agreement?
Ms. Crawford, Mr. Stalin conceded that war was not totally always acceptable as the means of handling disputes. He knew that his own nation was invaded. Approximately 22 million of his people were killed in the war. And he knew the value of some international order so as to prevent further wars. Hence his need for a certain buffer zone, you might call it, of nations, so that the Western nation, the United States, United Kingdom, Germany, would not attack it. See, even back then, while the war was still raging, Mr. Stalin was thinking, as you say, a few steps ahead. He just thinking about the security of his country and what the world would be like. He knew that once Hitler was totally destroyed, the Western nations would start turning against him. And he knew that so-called, what I call the Iron Curtain would come up.
And yes, in fact, that expression, the Iron Curtain, was a term that you coined.
Yes, I rather regret it. I mean, the way certain of your pundits had ran away with it and beat it to death. I mean, it's totally ridiculous.
But go on. I'm sorry I interrupted you. I just, please continue.
And ever since the end of the war, Ms. Crawford and Mr. Dostoevsky, collective security has been the pillar of the Western nations. Hence NATO, hence the United Nations, with the agreement that before resorting to any war, after its devastating consequences,
and that the devastation being nuclear weaponry and the nuclear technology as being out of bounds for something that could be used in any sort of conflict.
Yes, that has always been a concern of mine, that the spread of nuclear technology and the use of such weaponry, it would totally destroy our civilization. And only a maniac would attempt something like that. Well, you know how Mr. Putin has bragged about heightening his nuclear forces.
I want to just jump in, if I may, and ask a question of Mr. Dostoevsky.
Yeah.
Because as you hear Sir Winston talk, one of the things that's very clear is that Russia is enamored with aspects of Western culture. And at the same time, the need for a buffer nations, I believe, buffer states, I think Sir Winston described it as. The need for buffer states because Stalin believed that there would at one point become if there were no buffer states, that the West and the East would clash. Is that accurate, Sir Winston? I mean, is that part of the understanding that that's why Russia needed these buffer states around it and hence the term the Iron Curtain. Is that what you felt at Yalta? Is that what the idea was to accomplish? So Winston, I think
We'd be interested in your response, Mr. Dostoevsky.
Oh, okay. First of all, President Putin would like to go back to the actual division of Europe as it existed after Yalta. That's one of his goals. And one of the questions that I raised that if I were around today, and I would raise to you if you were around today, was your opposition to Russia and the Iron Curtain and control of Eastern Europe after World War II, as was agreed to at Yalta with you and President Roosevelt and Premier Stalin. Was your opposition to the fact that Russia had it, or that Russia was communist and that a communist country, and that a communist country could threaten Western capitalism as you know it? And was that your, because your tolerance of other dictators was not as you tolerate other dictators, and at the same time you had a disdain for Mr. Stalin and our culture, and all President Putin wants to do is go back to those boundaries that you agreed to and Franklin Roosevelt agreed to at the Yalta Conference, and that
but,
is.
But one of the things you're overlooking, Mr. Dostoevsky, is that once the Iron Curtain, once it was declared, to stand up and say the Soviet Union is dead, is gone, and wasn't that Boris Yeltsin? Isn't that what he said? The Soviet Union is dead. So
and I cried when the Berlin Wall came down. Not I cried, but Putin cried, and I cried in heaven when the Berlin Wall came down.
But when that curtain was pulled back, when it no longer existed, then those buffer countries were to be free to make a decision as to which policies and which influences they wanted to have. And to every last one of them except Belarus, and I'm off the top of my head, the other one I cannot. Okay, they were the only two that opted to remain within Russia's sphere of influence, looking east, pre-Peter the Great, and all of the other ones. All those other countries, those so-called buffer countries, and that of course includes Poland, and Russia's terrified of Poland having freedom because every time that Russia was attacked, Poland was used as a corridor. So that's one of their problems. But I'm simply saying everything that happened as a result of the Iron Curtain being pulled back led to all of these buffer countries, the people that live there, making a decision that they wanted to have more of a Western influence. And so this whole idea of bringing them back under Russia's influence is not something. They're independent nations. They are not. They're being used as pawns, but they're independent nations, and they're also members of NATO. Ukraine isn't a member of NATO. That's why this is going on. Let us go back to the point of.
But Mother Russia, historically, the countries you were talking about were never independent countries. They were either part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Poland was partitioned by the West as many times it was partitioned by Russia. The Ukraine, as President Putin states, it was part of Russia and has always been part of Russia. Now, I know people say the Ukrainians are fiercely independent. They think of themselves differently than they're not Russians, but many of the major cities in the Ukraine are Russian speaking. So it was part of our heritage. And that the problem, as I see it, is the West wants to defeat Russia. And the Cold War that Putin wants to go back to, where Mother Russia dominated its sphere of influence, brought prosperity and world peace, other than the United States having wars in the Middle East and the Far East, to most of the world. There were no major conflicts after World War II, except those, of course, Britain did one, and the United States and Vietnam, and the Middle East. But Mother Russia really didn't get involved in any wars, and we were no threat. There was the Cold War stabilized the world.
I'm sorry to disillusion you, Mr. Dostoevsky, but Ukraine has a very long history dating back to pre-medieval times. It was originated from the Kievan, is a location of the Kievan Rus, from which the Russian and Belarusian nationalities emerged. So Mr. Dostoevsky, I believe your country's origins are from Ukraine as opposed to instead of vice versa. And the Ukrainians definitely consider themselves an independent sovereign nation with an independent sovereign culture.
And a different
and they
language.
are asserting that in their own streets, fighting your fellow Russians for their freedom. There's no more, excuse me, but Ukraine is no more a colony of Russia than Canada is a colony of the United States.
Northern Ireland is a colony of Great Britain.
I want to, okay, now that's another conversation. But I want to say this. The Russian interests in Ukraine, one of the things that we have not mentioned, and when we did the series on warm water, we did a little bit of a geography lesson about Russia and the fact that they're surrounded by cold water for 8 months out of the year, and that that is problematic. But also that the farms, I mean, they have territory, but not all of it is fertile. It has oil, of course. It has fossil fuels, but they also have a smaller imprint for agricultural things. And Ukraine that soil is fabulously rich and fertile. And if we could, I would ask if Control would put up screenshot 5, because if you look at that shot and you see these emaciated children, these are children who were starved as a result of the famine imposed upon the Ukraine by Russia. And so I'm agreeing with you so much, Sir Winston, that when Russia wants to allude to that the Ukraine is part of Russia and always has been, that's simply not true. It's just like the folk who believe the kind of stuff that Donald Trump would say. It's a big lie. Ukraine was not a part of Russia, and it made the decision that it wanted to be a democracy. Yes, there may be some problems with it, but it wants to be a democracy. So I just want us to see why Ukrainians have reason to not trust Russia and want to repel all of the Russian aggression that is happening now. And so that's what that shot represents. So I I would like, Mr. Dostoevsky, when you talk about what Russia should get from the Ukraine and why they have rights to the Ukraine, I don't. The explanation that it's part of it is not a good one. Is that, am I correct, Sir Winston? Is that?
Oh, could you repeat that, please, Ms. Crawford? I thought you were addressing Mr. Dostoevsky.
Well, no. The only thing that I was saying is that the notion that Ukraine belongs to Russia through some sort of ancient history is incorrect, and that is why it is incorrect. And I'm wondering how Mr. Dostoevsky responds to that. I mean,
because it became part of Russia after World War II, when it was part of the Soviet Union, and only because of the breakup of the Soviet Union and the agreement to take out nuclear weapons and give it its independence, is it no longer a part of Russia. And there are a lot of independent states that said they didn't want to be part of the Soviet Union, but are not now back in Russia. Whether President Putin took them or they came back voluntarily. We got Georgia's back into our empire.
After you invaded it.
Well, the Prime Minister Churchill, I mean, English imperialism is second to none in world history. So for you,
is it any better than or worse than Russian imperialism, Mr.
No,
President?
but President Putin and our culture, we do not like your hypocrisy. You don't want to own up to your own faults, and you just want to point fingers at Mother Russia. And that's one of the problems that President Putin has. And one of the reasons he's in the Ukraine is because he has a disdain for democracy. He doesn't think democracy works because it's a hypocritical system. And he's afraid that if he allows the Ukraine to be democratic, that cancer will spread. And he thinks democracy is a cancer. And I know his psyche. He thinks that cancer will spread to Russia, and he cannot abide that.
He can't abide the taking away of his power. That's why he cannot abide. And speaking of hypocrisy, Mr. Dostoevsky, we have to remind ourselves that Mr. Putin has become fabulously wealthy as president of Russia, over, shall we say, 22 billion, I understand. And a whole class of oligarchs has risen up around Mr. Putin to get even richer, such as around the oil and gas industry and the.
I don't think.
Your ideal Russia isn't so pure after all.
But I don't think the West can ever talk about accumulation of wealth and oligarchs. All you have to do is look at the last president of the United States and what he did and how he accumulated more wealth. And he's no different. You can interchange him with Mr. Putin. That's probably why they were such good friends.
May I say this in defense of the United States? And I'm saying it because it is my prayer that it's true. And that is that Donald Trump was an aberration. He was a mistake. He was, and we know he was a mistake. That's what I pray for. That the voters in this country know that he was a mistake. So I'm just throwing that in defense of the United States. I don't believe that they would ever do it again after they see the havoc that he's wreaked upon this country.
I'd be very.
But the rich, and I mean, you don't call them oligarchs in the United States, but they're the same thing. When you have people spending billions of dollars to go into space, and you have hunger all around, it's no different than Mother Russia. So
well taken.
So therefore, I mean, if you want Mother Russia to redistribute its wealth and the oligarchs not to accumulate more yachts and more fancy homes in London, then you could say the same thing about Elon Musk and Donald Trump and his gold toilets.
Mr. Dostoevsky, I'm sure your nation is quite capable of overthrowing its oligarchs. And yes, Ms. Crawford, I hope we can be able in my country and yours to overturn both our oligarchic classes.
Your prime minister right now, Mr. Boris Johnson, won't even crack down on all the rich oligarchs that have billion-dollar yachts and homes in London. So, come on.
I mean, that's the real ruling class anymore in Britain and in the United States. They have no idea of service to the nation or to the people, just as my class was taught. This ruling class is only interested in accumulating more and more money for what?
I want to say this.
Well, we can end on that, Mr. Churchill. I love you.
Wait a minute. Yes, that's exactly what I was going to say. That's a good note to end on. Noblesse oblige is a wonderful note to end on, especially here for us. So again, this has been Conversations Across Time. I ask you to tune in next week for the continuation of this conversation. And at that point, we'll get directly to the issue of Ukraine. Thank you so much. It's been fun. Good night.
Conversation across the town. Conversation across 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 town.